Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. Today I thought that I would share with you some valuable insight that I have gained over the years. I'm going to share with you the key to successful homeschooling. As I was pondering what I was going to talk to you about when it came to this today, the very first thing that came to mind that I was going to share with you as being the key to successful homeschooling was to take everything that you know about traditional schooling and just pushing it completely out of your mind. And while that does still hold true, what I've realized is that I'm going to go one step further. And I'm going to tell you that the key to successful homeschooling is to do everything opposite of what school does. Let's take a look at this. Most homeschooling parents were in a traditional school setting, whether it would be public school or private school. So what do parents do? They will repeat what they know, and they will bring those schoolish methods into their homeschool routine. But the fact is that most of us realize by now that traditional schooling method doesn't work very well, or we wouldn't have, what is it now, 3 or 4 million homeschooled children just in the United States alone. So why do we go back to those public school methods? Why do we go back to those traditional school methods? It's because we're familiar with that. So we take what we remember from our schooling years and we try to do that to our kids. But the thing is that if it doesn't work in a traditional school setting, chances are it's not really going to work so well in a homeschool setting either. And, it can be really hard to get out of this mindset, and it can be really hard to break that mold, and to kind of be a trailblazer, trying new things. Because even when you realize that you're doing this because you know that it's best for your children, you can't help but compare yourself to those schools, or to your neighbors whose kids go to school, or to your friends' children's, or your family members whose kids go to school. And so today I'm just going to go over with you some of the things that are the common way of thinking when it comes to traditional schooling, and why we really do need to think about doing the opposite in our homeschool. So the first, common way of thinking of a traditional school is to use the same curriculum for every single student. So what is the opposite of that? Well, don't use the same curriculum for every single student. Not all kids learn the same way. And I will even go a step further, and I will say to you that textbooks really aren't the way to go for most kids. Textbooks are the fallback method for traditional schools. It does not have to be the case in a homeschool. You need to take into account that every child learns differently. Your kids are not cookie cutter replicas of one another. So don't think that just because this family is using a certain curriculum that you have to use it as well. Or don't even think that just because one of your kids is having success with a certain curricula that you have to use it with another child as well. Do what fits your child. This is not assembly line learning like a traditional school setting. Take advantage of the opportunity to give your kids the individualized education that will help them learn best. So a second common schoolish way of thinking is that kids need to sit still for long periods of time while they are doing their schoolwork. This is completely the opposite of how kids are naturally wired. At least most kids, they need to move. They have a natural energy that a lot of us adults wish that we would still have. And to try to force kids to sit for really long periods of times actually will make learning harder for them, because they will spend all of their mental energy trying to make themselves sit still to get done what they have to do, that they won't be able to concentrate on the work that is supposed to get done. So in your homeschool, take frequent breaks. Let your kids play in between. Let them go outside and run around. Let them move around. And if they can still concentrate, let them fidget. You don't have to have your kids sit still for 6 hours or even 4 hours at a time just because, their friends do at school. So another schoolish method is that kids have to be age segregated for socialization. You don't need to do that in your homeschool. The only time that kids, or anyone for that matter, will be segregated by age is in the school setting. And it's funny that this is always something that's brought up in socialization. Well, how are your kids going to learn how to socialize if they're not with other kids the same age? The fact is that homeschooled children do get to be with other kids the same age as them. It's just that they're not only with kids the same age as them. They get to be with people of all ages. And that is what socialization, which is actually for dogs and not actually human, should really be all about. Because you're never going to come across a situation in life where you're only around people the exact same age as you. So you need to scratch that off of your list of thinking that I'm depriving my kids of socialization by not having them in a class with 25 or 30 other kids the same age as them. No, what your kids need is to be exposed to people of all ages. So another schoolish way of thinking that we need to kind of do the opposite of is this notion that school is the real world. And that's another thing that homeschooled parents hear a lot of times from naysayers is, well, how are your kids going to learn to interact in the real world if they don't go to school? School is not the real world. School is kids sitting in a building where they are learning about the real world, but they're not actually participating in it. Do the opposite of that. Take your kids out into the real world. Let them participate in society. Let them go on errands with you. Let them see you interact with things, pay your bills, how you get things done as an adult, how you live life. This is living in the real world, not sitting in a school building for 6 to 8 hours a day. So another thing that a lot of traditional schools, pretty much all traditional schools do, is they say, don't question the narrative. Everything has already been figured out for you. And I know that there are a few unique teachers out there who will encourage kids to ask them questions. That honestly isn't the case most of the time. Most teachers do not like to be questioned, and they certainly don't like the narrative to be questioned. And maybe not so much the teacher, but those in charge of the teachers don't like that narrative to be questioned. But isn't that what learning should be all about? Learning should be about asking questions. It's not about memorizing information that has been handed to you. Learning should be about understanding how to research things on your own, following your curiosity, and being able to be a critical thinker, something that I mentioned in another video last week, something that just isn't taught in school anymore. So as a homeschooling parent, you should encourage your kids to do the opposite of school and to encourage them to question the narrative. So another notion that happens in traditional school that homeschooling parents really need to focus on the opposite of is that learning only happens in school. And this is something that I think a lot of parents have a hard time breaking away from. And I even remember when my kids were in school, I very often counted on their teachers to teach them everything that they needed. And I didn't really take advantage of all of the opportunities that I could have to help them to learn about other things. And this is something that I feel badly about even now, but it's something that we just have this innate feeling in us that learning happens at school, and that's the only place that it happens. But as homeschooling parents, we realize that learning happens everywhere. And this goes right back with that school is the real world when it really is not. Kids need to be out and about learning from life. That is the best way for them to learn. And so learning really does happen everywhere. It does not happen just in a school building. So another one that goes right along with that is the idea that only certified teachers are qualified to teach your kids. That isn't the case. The literacy rate was higher before compulsory school laws were set into place. So as homeschooling parents, we need to push that idea aside and do the opposite of that. We don't need only certified teachers to teach our kids. We need to get this idea that only experts are qualified to do things. Get this idea of technocracy out of your mind and realize that parents have been educating their own children for centuries, and they did it successfully. And it is only a very small amount of time that we have had certified teachers teaching children. No, That's not what you need. What your kids need is they just need to be around adults who care about them and who are interested in helping them to learn things, maybe being around mentors, other family members. A piece of paper really doesn't mean anything. So another notion that I think a lot of people follow in traditional schooling, and well, I have to say all traditional schools follow, is that kids should follow a prescribed developmental timeline. Those timelines drive me crazy because how many kids have been pushed into special education classes simply because they were learning at a different pace than other kids? This sets a stigma that is going to follow them all throughout their school years. I have talked about this in a few other videos. It is something that will have a debilitating effect on their self-esteem. I know this because one of my children went through this. He was put into special education classes when he was in school because he had ADHD, and they said that he had reading comprehension issues. And the thing is that even after he was no longer having difficulties in school, they still kept him in those classes because they said just in case if he ever needed it. And so to this day, he still makes comments. Now, I should mention he's an adult now. He still makes comments that he's stupid. And this is something that falls back from when I unfortunately did sign an IEP for him, just because he learned differently. He's brilliant. And you know what? There are so many children out there who are absolutely brilliant, but are simply following their own individual timeline. And this goes right back to the first thing that I talked about with you, that kids are not cookie cutter images of one another. Kids should be allowed to follow their own timeline. So do the opposite of what schools say. Don't think that every single child has to learn the exact same thing at the exact same time, because that's not how children are. They all have their own timeline. I'll give them the opportunity, give them the freedom, give them the advantage of learning in their own time. Because, you know, to be honest, it doesn't matter in the long run how old the child is when they learn how to read. It only matters that they do learn how to read. It doesn't matter how old the child is when they learn how to do basic math. It only matters that they learn how to do basic math. When your child is interviewing for a job when they are an adult, no one is ever going to ask them how old they were when they learned how to read. No one is ever going to turn them down for a job because they learned how to do basic addition when they were 8 instead of when they were 6. So you need to just knock these arbitrary timelines out of your head and realize that you need to treat your kids as the unique individuals that God created them to be. Okay, so another idea that is permeating the schools that we need to do the opposite of: schools teach to the test, very often to standardized tests. And even though a lot of homeschoolers don't have to take standardized tests, not all states do, but even when they don't, a lot of times you will find that, especially in high school, that is what they start doing. They start teaching their kids in a way that is going to help them out, for example, with their SATs. And while, yes, you definitely want to help your child prepare for SATs if they do plan on going to college, you should never focus their entire education over that one test. Teach your kids things that are going to be helpful to them for life itself. Teach your kids things that they are going to remember, that have meaning to them, and that are going to actually affect the things that they want to do in a possible career. Don't spend 4 years or possibly more teaching your kids so that they can pass one test that honestly won't have as much of an effect on them as the rest of their education will. Okay, so another way that we need to think opposite of what school does: school will tell you that society dictates morals. No, society does not dictate morals. Family dictates morals. God dictates morals. We should never be listening to what those around us are saying that we should and shouldn't be doing. That is something that the family needs to decide. That is something that you need to discuss. That is something that you need to trust in God to give you. Don't ever think that it's okay to do something just because society does. Very often society will lead you down the wrong path. Do the opposite of what school says. Don't listen to society when it comes to morals. So another idea that you're going to get from school, and that we need to do the opposite of, is that school will make you think that School is central to everything. And they show you that, by giving kids tons of homework, even when they should be at home spending time with their parents, they still are piled with homework after being in school for 7 hours a day. Somehow that's not enough. They have to give kids 2 or 3 hours of homework to do, sometimes on the weekends, sometimes over vacations. On top of that, you have parents having to ask permission to take their own kids on vacations. And so it just gives this entire idea that school is really the center of everything. School is not the center of everything. The family unit should be the center of everything. God should be the center of everything. And you should never ever think that you're doing something wrong just because you don't have your homeschool as the primary focus of your life. Your child's education is important, yes, but your family is more important. And that actually brings me to the last point that I want to make with you, something that a lot of schools will have you believe, and it's that academics come first. You need to do the opposite of that. Academics are important, yes, they don't come first though. You know what does come first in your homeschool? Relationship comes first, because in the long run it really doesn't matter how well read your child is, or how well they are able to memorize things, or how well they did on tests. If they don't have good character, if they don't have empathy for others, if they don't know how to show love to one another, that is going to have a far greater effect on the quality of their lives and the quality of their impact on others than any report card that had straight A's on it ever will. So again, I just really want to reiterate this to you. Everything that you know about school, if you want a successful homeschool, take everything that you know out of school, push it out that window, and don't look back. Do things the way that you as a parent, you understand more than what any one system can teach your kids. And if you've watched my other videos, you know that, I realize that there is more to the school system than education. And education is actually not even primary to the school system. So as a parent, when you are deciding to homeschool your kids, you are taking responsibility for their education. Do things in a way that come natural to you. Do things in a way that have proven over centuries to be the way that kids naturally learn best. And don't worry about what anyone on the outside has to say. Anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one over on Instagram because YouTube disabled my comments. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.